Hey Ross, how are you? Welcome to Minus 16. Thank you for making the time to chat with us.
It's great to be here. Thank you.
So first of all, how are you keeping? Because I know you had a bit of a brush with COVID, didn't you?
I did. It was about 7 days. Had to get monoclonal antibody infusions on day 5, but all good now.
Sweet. So you're feeling healthy again?
Yes.
Now for you, apart from everyone feeling bad with COVID, I guess the downside for you was no training, right? Because you're an avid Ironman enthusiast, right?
Yeah, I did 12 Ironmans in 4 years and really enjoy it, but I don't really run long distance anymore, so I just focus on swimming and biking, but still really enjoy the training.
So talk us through the disciplines of Ironman, because I'm sure like many of us, I vaguely know about it. I know you went to the World Championships as well, didn't you?
That's right. So it's a 2.4-mile swim, 112-mile bike, and followed by a marathon. So it's a long day. It's a lot of time.
I was going to say, what is the time span for that? I mean, that is a lot. So what's the time span for it?
Yeah. You get 17 hours basically, and my finishes were between like 10:45 and 12:45 over the 12 races that I did.
Because presumably to get out to the World Championships, you have to be a decent level anyway, right?
Yeah, you have to. So I had one really good race. I got in really good shape in like 2015, and I had one race where I had some mechanical problems with my bike and some allergies. So that race didn't work out, although I was like in perfect condition. And then the next race, everything went well, and I was first off the bike in my age group and just kind of cruised on the run and qualified for Kona, which is every Ironman's dream.
That's the pinnacle, is it? That's the one. Mount Olympus.
Yeah, yes. It's like a week of pageantry. You have parades, you have like an underwear run, you like swim out to a coffee boat, and you have a parade of nations. It's just a lot of festivities, and it was really fun for my kids to be there and experience all of that. That their dad was, made it into that level. So it was really fun.
So we will be talking about Apple eventually. I promise people that. We're not talking purely about Ironman. But just before we get on to the other areas of your life, but the training for that must take an awful amount of time, I would have thought. I've got some knowledge of training for events, but not Ironman, clearly. But
yeah, I was probably training like 20 hours a week or so. And then like the time spent on recovery was probably another 10 hours a week. So in total, probably, 20 to 30 hours a week dedicated to it.
So almost a full-time job.
Yeah, I basically retired for 4 years after selling my first company, Display Search, to just do Ironmans. And I went from 230 pounds to 180 pounds. I lost 50 pounds over that time. Yeah.
Wow. I mean, you're looking fit and healthy now. So are you still training, competing now? You got the Ironman
really
shirt
competing. On. Yeah, it's a hard shirt to get, to have done the Ironman. I think maybe like 50,000 people have done it in the world or something like that, the one in Kona. So I'm proud of it. But I'm not really training for any races at the moment. I'm just trying to get in good shape, enjoy the beautiful weather here, and do what I love to do.
So talking about your education, which is obviously clearly leading to where your business life picked up. I know you spent some time in Japan, didn't you, at university?
That's right. So my story really starts when I went to Australia. So I studied at University of New South Wales in Sydney, and I studied under a Japan expert, and he said, what you really should focus on is the relationship between U.S. and Japan in the semiconductor industry, the competitive issues there. And I got very focused on the semiconductor industry as my case study. And then I decided to go to a graduate program at UCSD focused on the Pacific Rim. So I was trying to get like a Japan MBA. And so U.S.-Japan competitiveness was my main focus. And then I happened to meet Bob Noyce, who was the inventor of the integrated circuit and the founder of Intel. And he said, and I was going to go study in Japan for a couple of years. And he said, what you should focus on is the relationship between the chip makers and the equipment and material suppliers in Japan. Because the U.S. Government and U.S. industry doesn't really understand that. And we need more education because Japan was such a threat to the U.S. at that time. So I went to Japan. I did a lot of primary research I really enjoyed it. I wrote a book that I called Silicon Sumo, U.S.-Japan Competition in the Semiconductor and Semiconductor Equipment Industry. And by the time I got back, and I sold the research to a consortium called Semitech, and published the book and sold a lot of copies, or a few copies, to people in the industry. And over the next few years, the U.S. sort of overtook Japan in semiconductors. And as a Japan expert, my career would be limited in the semiconductor industry. So I thought, what other industries the U.S. hopelessly behind Japan in, and likely never to catch up, where a Japan expert would have a good career? And that was the display industry.
That was
so
the segue.
From semiconductor, yeah. So I moved from semiconductors into displays. My first job in displays was at Brooks Automation, which makes the robots that handle the glass. So you have these big, thin pieces of glass, and they need super precise robots that can handle the glass without breaking it. And at the time when I started, the industry was just moving to Gen 3, which was like 550 millimeters by 650 millimeters. And now we're at Gen 10.5, which is about 3 meters around each side. So the glass is grown tremendously.
Huge,
and
yeah.
that's how we went from making 15-inch panels cost effectively all the way to 75-inch panels. So they kept growing the glass size.
Because you mentioned early on when you had your hiatus and went into Ironman, you had a company early on. It's one of those sort of rags to riches stories, isn't it? You kind of started off with barely a penny in the pocket and sold it for 10 million. Is that right?
A little bit north of 10 million. So
I was rounding down. I was just being polite.
Yeah.
It's the British way.
Yeah. So I left Brooks Automation, and I was at a crossroads in my life. Brooks was doing well; it had just gone public. Lam Research asked me to be their flat panel product manager. Lam is one of the most successful semiconductor equipment companies. And then my dad was running a startup in the display space on driver ICs. And so my mom stepped in and said, well, if you come to Austin and work for your dad, I'll introduce you to a lot of women. And so she gave me like 10 numbers.
The old nuggets always work.
It was hard. Yeah, it was hard for me to date in Boston. I had a long commute, didn't know a lot of people. So I took their offer, and then the company went out of business like 9 months later, and I had no money. And so I figured out, well, what can I do? And so I published a newsletter like 6 days, right before SID. I printed like 300 copies. It was like 8 pages. And what I did was I translated Japanese technical magazines about what was going on in the display industry, and added my own analysis based on my own experience, and just just printed out like 300 of them and laid them out outside the conference rooms at the big SID conference, which is the Society for Information Display, and they have a big show once a year. And people started grabbing them and reading them and subscribing, and I was having to send like ads via fax, because like email wasn't big yet, and so I didn't have any lists, so I was just sending things via fax, and then I would have to go to Kinko's and have to go to FedEx in order to mail them out. And I mean, it really was a rags to riches story. Started with nothing, had no capital in the business, just all sweat equity, just my labor, and eventually had 30 people, and we were doing $6 million in revenues when I sold it. And by the time I left 3 years later, it was up to like 10 million in revenues. And it gave me a lot of confidence that I could, be successful in the display industry. I actually went and joined Samsung, and
working for them
after I left, working for Samsung Display. It was actually called Samsung LCD, and they were interested in solar photovoltaics, and they were running that business through the display business, because they were using similar technology, thin film technology, to make big solar panels the same way they make LCD panels. And so I learned about solar, and then decided to start my own solar market research business. But that was going to require a lot of investment, because the market was really in China and in Germany, and I didn't really want to make big investments. And so I sold that business, And then I started doing Ironman basically. And then I got injured and I decided to come back to displays and hooked up with former customers and former employees and partners of mine in the past, and kind of have like an all-star team of analysts at DSCC.
So I was going to ask you what tempted you back into the world of business then. It was just the time was right kind of thing. You'd missed it and you were ready to launch another company.
Yeah, it was also the whole flexible foldable display opportunity. I was very excited about that. I thought that had a lot of potential, and I was excited to see where that could go. And that was my real initial focus, and also fell back into the things that I used to enjoy covering, like new fab schedules and supply and demand and equipment market. And basically, we see OLEDs as the future of the display industry. And so we're sort of tracking where OLEDs are going next. So, it's been smartphones and TVs. Now it's notebooks and tablets and, monitors and automotive. And so we're very focused on where OLED is going, and spending less time on the legacy, more silicon LCD type.
Actually, one of the questions that has just come to mind that I wasn't going to ask, you just mentioned automotive. With Apple's announcement of CarPlay and the full-blown CarPlay, will the displays in the car be also part of your remit as well?
Yeah, we already are covering that. It's a small segment, especially for OLEDs because there are lifetime and sunlight readability issues. So they're addressing that with tandem stacks and in other ways. And the OLEDs can be shaped and curved, and that's attractive for the automotive market. So we think OLEDs will do quite well there. We're starting to see some bigger orders going to Samsung and LG for automotive. And it's not going to be the biggest display market, but it's probably going to grow the fastest from here.
And also, you were always very quiet on social media, and then kind of halfway through last year, suddenly I started to see your name coming onto Twitter. That was clearly a conscious decision you made, because obviously I, as many of the people listening to this podcast, have got to know you as a leaker. Is that wrong to say? And your name was always coming up, and anyone was talking about what we were expecting to see in the market. It was Ross Young of DSCC was such and such and such. So suddenly you became more prominent, more obvious, and more vocal and focal. Was that a choice that you made then?
Yeah, I was looking for ways to grow the visibility of my new company. And seeing company roadmaps is something that we would do, is something that we would work on for years. So going back to my first company, starting like 2000, 2001, we would actually publish a report with all companies' roadmaps in them from a display perspective. And it's kind of an artifact of our business, because our main business is forecasting the market, determining market share, forecasting prices and costs. So it's really not about, what's the next Apple smartphone display specs or the next Samsung phone colors. That's not something that our customers really care about that much, but I know that there are a lot of people that do. And I saw a lot of press being given to just crazy rumors that I knew were wrong. And I was like, they should be talking to me. Why aren't they talking to me? I know that that's wrong, and the right information is X. So, I would tell the media that if they asked me. And so I decided to start leaking the kind of information that we're seeing that my customers really don't care about, that I knew people cared about, and started getting a good reputation for being accurate, because I'm only going to leak stuff that I know is true. I'm not going to leak stuff that I don't believe is true. That would only worsen my reputation and worsen my company's reputation. So tend to focus on, what we know is happening, and it turns out that there's a lot of people that care about it and getting a lot of really good press about it.
So that we all understand the position of your company then, would I be right in understanding that, say, Sony, LG, Apple, Samsung would come to you and say, what are the trends? What are the other people asking for? So they can all go away and make their business plans for the next year and their forecast next year as to how popular OLED's going to be, LCD when it was a thing. Is that kind of the position of your company?
Yeah, so we produce a large number of reports on an annual basis. They're published weekly, monthly, or quarterly. And once a year, those companies will renew those reports. So, so like we have like an a la carte list, and they say, okay, we're interested in foldable displays, we're interested in OLED TVs, we're interested in OLED volumes and prices, we're interested in display costs, that kind of thing. And then they would pick from those reports and they would buy them and get them throughout the year. Occasionally, companies will say, we have special needs and we want some custom work done, and we'd like you guys to interview, panel suppliers in China and find out this or find out that. But mostly, like, we're probably 60+% these syndicated reports, and maybe 20% consulting, and when times were good before COVID, maybe 20% events, because we do put on a few events during the year as well.
And I'm guessing that you're kind of at the coalface, because if none of these products can be made without a display, so if you're being asked by a number of different manufacturers about a certain type of display, that obviously gives you a very good indication, right, that's what's coming, I assume.
Yeah, I mean, we're lucky in that we're surveying the supply chain on forward-looking shipments. And so when a new model, let's say a new model is introduced in September, we'll see the production volumes for that model start in, say, July. So, and then we'll see that and we'll get access to perhaps some of the specs for that model. So, we know the volumes, we know the specs, and even if it's, say, June, we're getting that information. So I can see what the volumes would be for like the iPhone 14 different models produced by Samsung or BOE or LG for the next 3 months. And so I can see which models are going to be higher volume, what the focus is going to be, and who's getting the most allocation from the panel supplier perspective. So that's the kind of volume we see. We also can get sometimes production data, and that may have on the smartphone side, and we may have visibility into like the different colors for that product. So when I publish the number of colors, or when I publish information about the colors of a given smartphone, I can see the volumes associated with those colors as well. So I know it's a sure thing. I don't get the marketing names. The companies have all of these crazy names for the different colors, but I get the actual colors.
And I've been intrigued to understand and know the information you're giving out. How does that not cross the line of NDAs and any confidentiality agreements you might have? Because you're hitting with the big players. I mean, I know Apple are one of your customers, so I'm guessing are they a little bit pissed, or are they happy that you're kind of putting the stories out there for them?
What Apple executives told me is that they've gotten used to it, and I'm sure it has served their interest, having their products constantly being discussed in the media. I try to help them out every once in a while by clarifying, incorrect information. So we know what's going to be introduced, and someone says something else, and then that may distort the market and confuse a lot of customers, potential customers, or cause them to be less interested in the product. I may, get out there and tweet about the right information, and why people should get excited.
So if we begin looking at sort of specifics now, if that's okay with you, obviously I don't expect you to transgress anything you shouldn't say, but I mean, we're going through our lull at the moment, which everyone understands in the tech space. The summer's always pretty quiet, but I guess not so much for you because you're forecasting and looking forward. So we've got the fall events coming up. We know iPhone 14 is coming. So those panels, those screens on those phones, when would they all be locked down? I mean, I know you said production probably ramped up in June, or maybe currently at the moment. When would you have known for a full lockdown, for instance, on the Pro models, that it's going to be the pill and punch display that we're going to get this year?
Yeah, so we started seeing production in June for the iPhone 14 lineup. And we've, the numbers are going up every month, and we have visibility into the forecast at the moment through August on a monthly basis. And I commented on Twitter that the iPhone 14 Max volumes looked really low to me, They were like 3.5 times below the 6.1-inch Pro volume, and the Pro Max volumes are even greater than that. So the Max is really far behind the Pro Max, maybe like 1/4 or 1/5. So it seems to me that that product could be, have later availability at this moment. And so that's, something that some people care about. Certainly it's in Apple's interest to sell more of the Pro model. So it makes sense that they're going to have greater availability of the Pro models versus the Max and the 14 itself.
Over in the UK at the moment, we're experiencing a really painful cost of living crisis. Is that happening in the US, and also are you noticing it worldwide, and is that affecting volumes?
So that is affecting smartphone volumes overall. It seems like Apple is likely to be a little bit immune to some of those issues.
Aren't they always?
Customers are more loyal. Yeah, Apple's customers are more loyal. We're seeing greater weakness in like the low end and the mid range part of the smartphone market. So the Chinese brands have been hit quite a bit harder, and Samsung, of course, has had some issues as well in their sort of mid range and lower end lines since they're such a high volume supplier. But the high end has done quite well and is expected to continue to do well. Foldable looks like it's going to do well. The volume projections are like double from last year, and the iPhone volumes look to be pretty solid. Although, I think there are a lot of buyers that may wait for the USB-C version of the iPhone next year, since so many people complain about the Lightning cable. But on the other hand, so many people have multiple Lightning cables, so they're going to have to throw them all away if they go with the 15. So the projections are that the 14 is on schedule, and there's been some of the suppliers are seeing greater numbers than they originally expected, like Samsung, because BOE has had some issues, and so that has resulted in greater volumes for Samsung.
So a moment ago you mentioned foldables. Were you meaning in general or for Apple? It sounded like you were talking almost Apple. Obviously, my ears are trying to pick up on every nuance that you're saying at the moment. Forgive, but you're just talking about foldables in general, yeah.
Specifically for Samsung, so their projections are about double what they were last year. So I think they are going to be very aggressive, like they were in their marketing last year, and perhaps we're going to get some better pricing on the Fold 4. So yeah, I'm impressed by their aggressiveness, and that they're confident they're going to be hitting those volumes for this year.
And talking of foldables, I mean, do you see a future for Apple in that? Do you think they're actually interested in it, or is that boat sailed now and they're just letting it do its own thing?
I think it's a threat to Apple. So if Samsung gets even more aggressive and say prices the Z Flip at a similar price than the Max, or the 14 itself, Apple is going to have, you would think Apple would have to respond, or they would lose a lot of potential high-end clients. If you're going to have a foldable, which is believed to have a premium price below the Pro, and there's no sacrifices or compromises on the clamshell phone from Samsung, the Z Flip, like if they improve the cameras, I would think Apple would lose quite a bit of market share, and that would be certainly a big concern to them. One of the reasons that Apple may not want to do foldable is, it would really benefit Samsung, because the display cost is going to be a bigger percentage of the price, and the cover material, the cover window, which is right now at Samsung ultra thin glass, that Samsung is involved in fabricating.
And that's the layer at the very top, is it? The bit that we touch. Yeah.
Yeah. So that also is more expensive, and that would also benefit Samsung. So Apple would see less margin per phone if they go with foldables, most likely at a clamshell configuration. Perhaps, the more expensive in-folding type, which is more of a convergence device, it's priced very high. There's a lot of margin there. There's a lot of room to price below Samsung or above Samsung, at a smaller size or larger size. And I think that's what Apple's looking at. The other real issue is that that cover window, the UTG, the ultra thin glass, that is supply constrained. There's only so much capacity. And if Apple was to do a high volume device there would have to be a big investment to really increase the capacity for that for the cover window. And I don't think Apple's ready to force that to happen, because certainly there would be costs associated with it, and risks associated with it, and they would want multiple suppliers, and perhaps, Schott is the one that's doing most of the business. Apple tends to work with Corning. Maybe it's not clear what the confidence level, that Apple has with multiple suppliers. So, I think Apple is going to continue to watch that market. But I think, we're hearing rumors that they're interested in like a 20-inch foldable device. So the supply chain is calling it a notebook. You could also say it's a tablet or even an all-in-one. But that is something that wouldn't be high volume, would be likely very expensive. It would be very unique. Could be very unique to Apple. And they're what people may not understand is that they're actually one of the leaders in display technology. They're solving problems for the display suppliers so that the display suppliers could make products for them. And other companies like Dell and HP, aren't doing that to that sort of degree. Apple has a very strong display engineering team, a lot of really talented people that have been there for a long time.
I didn't realise. I assumed the displays came to Apple as a done deal, but you're saying they have quite a bit of input into them. They'll be looking at user problems and making them an easier product to use. So they are working sort of hand in glove with the manufacturers of the panels as well.
Yeah, so they will they will have requirements, and that they will ask the display manufacturers to meet those requirements, and their requirements may be more challenging and innovative than the rest of the industry. So, for example, on the MacBook Pros that were introduced last year, they were the first company to come out with a mini LED notebook and ProMotion, right? Variable refresh. Nobody else was even working on it, but Apple, had the foresight to say this is where we think the market is going to go, and would want this kind of product, and we're gonna take. We're going to be early to market with this product, and we think it gives us a lot of advantages, not just technically, but also, it reduces their reliance on Samsung, because Samsung is not in the supply chain for mini LED notebooks or tablets, and so it gives them more leverage over Samsung in negotiating with them for OLEDs. So now Samsung can pick. Apple can choose and create an environment for lower pricing between OLEDs and mini LEDs. They're using them both. If one of them wants to get more volume, they're going to have to outperform and offer better pricing and better support than the other. So they've created a really nice competitive environment. No other brand is really doing that to the extent that Apple is. And like with OLEDs now, they're making requirements where it needs to have a tandem stack, which really for IT will really overcome the concerns about lifetime, will really boost brightness, because the mini LEDs are so bright. For OLEDs to compete and replace mini LEDs, the brightness can't be compromised. It can't be sacrificed. So, they're going to have to really boost brightness, and Apple's pushing all of the OLED suppliers to really improve the brightness and the lifetimes of their products. And so we don't see other companies doing that, and that's why companies will dedicate new fabs to Apple, which is something that they also want. So they don't have to compete with other companies for allocation, and they get the entire company's support at that line.
You mentioned the 120 hertz refresh rate and ProMotion. Are those technologies hugely costly at the moment, and are they likely to come down with the economies of scale as more suppliers begin taking them on board?
Yeah, I think it's a single digit, maybe a high single digit increase for the panel supplier. So it's very much something that the brands can market and easily cover those additional costs. And clearly, the market's going there in smartphones and in high-end tablets and in gaming notebooks. So it's a trend that everybody's following.
And how close to the final action are you? I'm thinking, for instance, just to one side, I've got a studio display. Now, I seem to recall earlier this year, you knew that there was a 27-inch something happening, because you wouldn't presumably know if that panel was going to be used on an iMac or a standalone display. Would that be right? You just know there's a 27-inch panel in the pipelines.
Yeah, not even the panel suppliers always know what the product is. They just know, here's the size, here's the resolution. They may not, have complete visibility into the final product if Apple doesn't let them know, or the people we're talking to don't have that insight. But we were talking to mini LED companies in this case, and the mini LED companies were saying, yeah, we're building this 27-inch backlight for Apple. But they didn't know the exact configuration, or at least the people we didn't talk to didn't know or were reluctant to disclose it.
And going down the line, I think, again, on Twitter, you've mentioned that there could be another version of the Studio Display coming out this year, possibly a 32, possibly 6K. Is there anything you've seen from the data you're getting about that?
No, we're not really hearing anything about a 32-inch 6K at the moment.
27-inch 6K?
Apple. No, not hearing anything about 6K.
It's like you're on the defense court. I'm like trying to get every word out of you.
Yeah, I don't know if it's going to be 4K or 5K, honestly. All I can tell you is it's going to be mini LED, but it's not going to be as many mini LEDs as they're using in their MacBook and iPad Pros. So it's going for a lower cost solution. And you really don't need, for monitors, you're a little bit further back from your monitor, so you don't really need as much resolution, as tight of a resolution as many LEDs, perhaps, in a monitor. And the monitor market is more price sensitive than the notebook market, right? Monitors are selling for $500 or less, while notebooks are selling for $1,000 to $3,000. So you can justify a more expensive mini LED backlight solution for a notebook than you can for a monitor. And there are a lot of mini LED monitors with not that many mini LEDs. So that's sort of the environment that Apple's competing in. But 27 inches is small. I have a 34-inch monitor. I wouldn't want to go down to a 27-inch even if it had mini LEDs. I have 3 pages side by side, which I really like.
Mm-hmm. Now, it's a bit of tech that I'm guessing might be important to you as an athlete and as an Ironman. The watch. Do you wear Apple Watch, or you do? So
I have an Apple Watch.
Okay.
I'm not wearing it these days.
In favor of? Or?
I like my Garmin swim watch. So I haven't figured out, maybe someone online watching your program will explain to me how I can sync up my Apple Watch to my Garmin and Strava. So to the Garmin app and to Strava, I don't know how to do that. So my Garmin watch simply does that. I just hit a button and it speaks to my phone, and then I see my results in my Strava with all of the training information that I want to see. So
and that records the same kind of that records the same kind of information as it, your heart rate, your distance covered, I'm assuming calories burned, all of the kind of critical information you need.
And it has probably more swim metrics than the Apple Watch would have.
Mm-hmm.
It's, same thing with my bike computer. I have a Garmin bike computer, and I can see my cadence and my heart rate and my power, and I see it on my bike, and then it communicates to my Garmin app, and it shows up on Strava. The Apple Watch, it's harder to see that when you're biking, to look at your watch, when I can be looking at
sure.
8 or 10 fields on my bike computer the whole time. But my heart doctor told me that I should be wearing an Apple Watch, because if I have a cardiac episode, you can hit a button and, take the kind of test that you need that he finds useful in assessing, any heart issues. Because I was having some issues where my heart rate would go over like 220 for like 5-10 minutes at a time, and it wouldn't slow down. And I didn't have my watch on at the time, and so I couldn't capture what was happening. This was a result of, in his view, taking in too much caffeine, like having I would drink coffee with a lot of caffeine, and maybe have a Coke, and then maybe have these cliff shot blocks. I'm taking like 100 milligrams of caffeine, and it's just, at my age, that's not healthy for your heart, especially if you're doing vigorous exercise.
Oh,
learn to back off.
Don't take the coffee away from me as well, please. No, everything but the coffee. So obviously I brought the watches up because we're expecting there to be a launch of 3 watches in the fall this year. And for the first time, possibly, it's now the latest rumours being called a Pro rather than a rugged. Are you seeing any display analytics that suggest there is a new watch coming?
For sure. We've been publishing in one of our reports for about 6 months now that they're going to have a larger display, 1.99 inches diagonal. And that will be sole sourced to LG display. It'll have LTPO, so it's variable refresh and always on display. And it'll have chip on film, it'll have the integrated touch. So yeah, I mean, the volume isn't as high as the smaller displays, so it seems that it's going to be pretty expensive, and it would make sense given those volumes that perhaps it's some sort of rugged or pro model that's going to be at a higher price point.
Because of course we have heard stories just recently that this watch could be priced around about the $1,000 mark, and again, you're saying from the technology that's going into it, certainly from a display point of view, that would kind of add up, would it?
Yes. That's right. I don't know anything else about the case or the band or anything else, but yeah, I mean, the volume, you would think that the volumes would be higher if it was at a lower price point. So it must be, something priced pretty expensive.
And you've been talking a lot about OLEDs, that being the future. Why are OLEDs so much more of a future than mini LEDs? I mean, that might be a very naive question. I'd like to know more clarity, just in a layman's term, and I'm sure many people listening, same thing. Why is OLED so much going to be the future for us?
Well, cost is one reason. So mini LEDs, for example, in the MacBook Pro and the iPad Pro, cost quite a bit more than a similar sized OLED. And that's because the implementation is, there's 10,000 mini LEDs, so, it adds up very quickly. So you can buy an OLED for less. Mm-hmm. The OLEDs have higher contrast. The OLEDs are lighter. They have better viewing angles, better response times, better motion performance. The only thing that mini LED offers is greater brightness and the potential for lower cost depending on the implementation. But it's really just about the brightness. It kind of narrows the gap between an LCD and an OLED because the black levels are better on a mini LED versus an LCD. OLED black levels are, that's sort of the gold standard because each pixel is completely off, while in a mini LED, like each zone is off, and you may have like 200 or you may have a few hundred zones on a mini LED LCD or 1,000 zones. While on an OLED, each pixel is a zone, respectively, and so you could have 2 million zones. So the OLED should always look better from a contrast and black level perspective, other than in a really bright room or outdoors because of the higher brightness of the mini LED, and the fact that OLEDs could wash out at lower brightness. That's where mini LED might do better. But the trend, the technology outlook is for OLEDs to really improve technically, and that's happening because Samsung has a large number of Chinese players, nipping at their heels, and they're trying to, stay ahead of them. The best way they can do that is through technology advances, and the fact that Apple is really wanting OLEDs to, improve their performance before they're going to be implemented in Apple's IT products. And so those two things are leading to tandem structures, phosphorescent blue, which would lower power by 30%, increase lifetime. Something called color on encapsulation, where you remove the polarizer, which blocks a lot of the light, and replace it with a very thin color filter layer. There's something called multi-cell, or multi-cell array or something like that, where you create like a light absorption structure where you maximize the efficiency by creating like a lens through these high, I can't remember, it's early in the morning for me, certain kind of material. And so there's ways to really boost brightness. And then what's also going to happen is cost is going to come down by moving to these larger fabs. Instead of Gen 6, they're going to go to Gen 8.5 or Gen 8.7. And so those fabs will be optimized for larger and larger panels. And then the other thing that's happening is, rather than a traditional LTPS or LTPO backplane, which uses a lot of mass and it requires very high capital intensity and CapEx, they're going to go to what's called an IGZO or oxide backplane, which may have half the number of masks, which really lowers the capex and should result in you know, significant reduction in depreciation per panel. So you have all of these trends kind of happening at the same time, and you know, you're getting better performance at lower cost, and so the outlook looks really good for OLEDs, and so that's why we're really focusing on them, where OLED is going.
A little bit earlier on when we were chatting, you mentioned about obviously the lockdowns in China and the delays that made. As far as you know, A, are they kind of catching up now? And B, I read some stories that it was only going to be possibly the Pro and Pro Max 14s that would be actually ready for release a week after the fall events, with the others on pre-order. So is there still some delay going on?
I think the 14 Pro and 14 Pro Max volumes suggest that it should be available at launch. You know, there are 3 suppliers on the 14. The risk is where you only have one supplier, which we think is on the Pro and the Max. And the Pro volumes are quite good, and the Pro Max volumes are quite good. So it's really just the Max, which is surprisingly low. So that suggests that there will be some sort of delay in my mind at this moment.
It's interesting.
You know, we could see a huge shift in September, but the data through August shows that there's not enough Max models, Max panels.
I think what surprised me is, from what I've learned talking to you, is how quickly it's kind of not much of a lead time at all. It's a very rapid turnaround that you're seeing from manufacturer display to finished products. Because in a lot of industries, there can be a 8, 10, 12 month delay. But you're saying, you know, you're seeing a ramp now ready for products in just 2 months' time. When the panels are finally delivered, again, naive question. So if we say, look at an iPad, when the panel comes in for an iPad Pro, for instance, is it literally the finished size, shape and everything? All Apple have to do is drop it onto the product, the iPad, and it's finished?
Yeah, it's typically like it depends on how the panel is shipped to the OEM who's manufacturing it. Is it air-shipped or by boat? And the assembly times are not very long. And then it goes into inventory and shipped out. So, I mean, 4 weeks is probably a reasonable assumption from panel shipment to phone shipment. Yeah, so phones, panels shipped in August should result in phones shipped in September.
Wow, that is so quick a turnaround. I'm really surprised. I just assumed there'd be this massive lead time between manufacturer and OEM getting out the door. So, and again, obviously then through the year, the beast is just continually being fed, right?
Yeah. Okay. So I remember the
name
term I wanted to say, which was MLP, which is micro light control patterns. And so they have these high refractive materials which create a lens over each pixel, and that allows you to maximize
brightness out of it. Yeah. No. As you say, we've got you up early in the morning, so I appreciate you finding time to chat with us. I know. When I saw what time in the morning it was, I thought, how come you're not training at this time in the morning? I was really surprised. Do you get up and go out the door first thing normally, or?
No, I kind of try to get some work done first thing and wait till the sun is out and enjoy the vitamin D, being out in the sun, exercising.
And before you get out into that vitamin D, I've just got a couple of other questions for you. Sorry, I mean, You're looking way too healthy anyway. I think you can avoid the sun for a day and just sit in with us. But the iPad, the iPad, there's been this talk of a 14-inch possibly coming along. Are you seeing anything about that?
Yeah, we heard some comments about that from the backlight suppliers. Kind of surprised about it because you would think that if they're going to go bigger than the iPad Pro, the 12.9-inch mini LED iPad Pro, that it would also be an iPad Pro and have mini LEDs. And, you know, we heard that they didn't do the 11-inch with mini LEDs because they wanted to focus on 12.9-inch and up. So they don't want to bring the cost of mini LED into smaller products where it's harder to justify the higher prices. So 14-inch, I mean, it's kind of a strange product from that perspective. But on the other hand, you know, we're in a point where panel prices have been declining for over a year. They're very inexpensive, and they're at all-time lows in most cases. And you know, perhaps a panel supplier made Apple a very good offer on a 14-inch product where they could offer a very large, inexpensive iPad. perhaps less expensive than the 11-inch. And maybe that's what's creating some interest from Apple, is to get, try to expand the category and bring to market, something big and cheap. That's done really well in like the TV market. And like in the US, people try to get the biggest TV for the lowest price. 75 inches for, $5.99 or whatever. So it doesn't have to be, mini LED or, variable or, the highest refresh. People just want big and cheap.
Mm-hmm.
And maybe that's what they're targeting, maybe for the education market, or, maybe there's some reason for it. We don't have a lot of confirmations on that product, but, we have heard it from two sources. I wouldn't say it's 100% happening, but we've heard it from enough people for us to say, we think it may happen.
And we talked about the really rapid turnaround and lead times to final product. If we were looking ahead a year now, say towards the 15, which is inevitably come, you mentioned it, when it goes to USB-C, are you already beginning, or will the manufacturers, now that the 14 is kind of a slam dunk and they've got an idea, they've got a handle on the volumes, will production now begin to gear towards the 15 coming next year? Will they begin looking at that pretty soon?
Well, there's a engineering schedule where they make samples, and then Apple can sort of tweak what they see, and they may change the specs. There's still time to change the spec, but for the most part, it's pretty much locked in, I think, and they're just building prototypes for any modifications.
Right. Okay. So already there'll be something in somebody's hand at Samsung and at Apple looking at next year's tech and ironing out the problems now, ready to begin to go into production next year. Yeah.
And we don't see a lot of big changes. So the punch and pill holes will move to the 15 and 15 Max, so they'll all look the same.
Mm-hmm.
We don't know of course, USB-C will be a big change, but I'm sure Apple will continue to try to improve the efficiency of the display. We're not aware of anything super different at this moment. We don't expect LTPO to move to in promotion to move to the 15 and 15 Max, for example. I think in 2016, the iPhone 16
yeah.
in 2024,
yep.
we think that's where we could be under panel Face ID, and we know that they're working on that tech already, and the panels can be transparent already, and we think the panel suppliers have been qualified for doing the under panel Face ID and making the panels transparent in the the previous notch area. The issue is going to be sort of the sensor teams and the display teams working together, so it gives you the best results. And if any software needs to be modified, that could take some period of time to get everybody to get to that optimum solution. So, but we're hearing that 2024 looks really good for that.
So of course that was an obvious one. I'd forgotten about things such as that, the under-screen face recognition, and presumably the always on as well. They all come directly down to the display supply chain, right? It's those guys that are implementing that for us to be able to use it at the end product.
That's right. So,
yeah.
Display manufacturers are pivotal in those areas.
And you'd mentioned, funny enough, a second ago, something I was going to ask you was that the actual unit cost of the panels is coming down and down and down. So in the grand scale of the metrics of producing, say, an iPhone, the display isn't one of the high cost units of that phone then?
Well, it is. I mean, it's around 10% of the street price.
Right, okay.
In maybe, 5 to 10% or so. So it is a significant cost adder, but it's so important, right? And it's the most important component, I think, in the product. But if you add up all of the silicon versus just looking at one type of silicon, or one chip, and the semiconductor content is probably higher than the display. But in terms of a single component, I think the display is the most expensive single component.
I've just bought one of the new MacBook Airs, and you were spot on with the sizes on that months and months back. Now there's rumours starting about there possibly being a 15-inch version of the MacBook Air. Too early to tell, or?
Yeah, we've already said it's a 15.2. So, it'll probably be a little bit wider than the 15.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, than the previous versions. So, yeah, I think, Apple, because of their chip capability now, they're in a great position to launch more products at times that are most conducive to them, rather than the whole rather than the whole Intel world all launching, the latest Intel chip at the same time. Apple is in such a great position to differentiate with their own chip at timing that they want to launch at, and it gives them, with the control of the display supply chain that they have, plus where they are in semiconductors. I mean, they're stronger than ever. And I expect Apple to take a lot of share in all of the IT categories because of how well they're doing with their semiconductors. They can get the best capacity or the most advanced capacity allocation at TSMC and produce the fastest, most efficient chips at timing that is best for them. So I definitely think we'll see Apple continuing to gain ground in the IT space, and the Mac becoming more significant for them.
And I'll let you go soon, promise. Just a couple of other quick things I was going to ask. I mean, we assume that you're an Apple user, but are you? Because I know you said you prefer the Garmin watch because of the swim metrics, but are you an Apple guy?
Yeah, I have a MacBook Pro and I have an iPad Pro. So, yeah, and I have the watch. I need to start using it more in case I have a heart attack. Yeah, so I love Apple products. I think they're easiest to use, and I bought a Z Flip to experience the foldable phone, but it's such an adjustment to go from iOS to Android that
never done it.
It's really hard. And yeah, I braved it because I really wanted to experience the foldable phone and give real user experience with it, and I really liked it. But just texting alone, if I send out a group text, it goes to them as individuals, not as they can't maintain the group text to the iOS users. If I use WeChat, that would be different, but none of my family is on WeChat, and so that was a source of frustration for them. And they said, "Dad, use an iPhone." So I had no choice.
Are your kids Apple kids as well, or?
Yeah, they all have Apple computers and Apple and iPhones.
And what's sort of a day in the life of Ross like then? So, I mean, you get up and do some business. Are you office-based, working from home most of the time? Do you have to go to site? Do you go to Apple? I mean, you hit and play with some of the biggest in the markets. So do you have to spend much time on site at their locations and their facilities, or is it all working from your own office?
Yeah, it's all working from my own office. I mean, we'll visit customers, once or twice a year here in the U.S. and more if they ask for us to meet, but it's so easy just to meet virtually and meet with them wherever they are, all on one Zoom call or whatever. But when I'm in Silicon Valley, I'll take a week and meet with lots of companies. I used to go to Asia a lot and meet with customers there as well, but it's our people are so good in Asia that I don't need to be there. They'll give me reports, and we'll make sure I get that information to put into our reports and deliverables to our clients. But yeah, lately I've been dating a lot, so that's what's been taking up a lot of time.
That's why you got the smile on your face.
Yeah.
I was going to say, I mean, so we know that you're a mad keen athlete still and train a lot. I mean, not as much as you used to, but outside of that, what do you do to relax and unwind and get away from all then? I mean, I presume, much like myself, it's no screen time. You just want to get away from the screens for a bit and just do your own thing.
Yeah, I mean, other than going for long bike rides, swimming, and going to the beach, probably not that much. But there are all these dating apps, and so I've been very busy on the dating apps. So I had 3 dates yesterday, so it's hard to get too much done when you're dating that much. But I'm pulling back on the dating situation. So now, the first few weeks of the quarter for my company, my role is not particularly that heavy in terms of my workload. So it's the next 6 to 8 weeks that get a lot busier. But it's beautiful in La Jolla and San Diego, so try to be outside and go to the beach and
you near to the beach?
Walk or bike. Yeah, I'm about a mile away.
Nice.
I can show you the ocean if I point my camera.
Oh, as good as that. Near as that, really. You got a better scenery than me.
Yeah.
You really have. Probably time we let you go then, because you've obviously got good things to be doing and dating apps to be logging on to, and way more interested in talking to me. But just the good stuff. Where can people find you?
So on Twitter, it's at DSCC Ross, and I have both followers and super followers, and try to provide the latest and greatest leaks to my super followers. And our company website is displaysupplychain.com. We have a free blog that you can register for, and we post a lot of content every Monday.
I was on it this morning looking at it. I was having a good read through. So wonderful. Thank you so much for your time. I'm glad we finally managed to hook up, because I know it's been a little bit troublesome, what with a little bit of ill health and the time difference and so on, but I'm sorry it's so early in the morning. I hope you managed to get some rest.
Thank you.
Ross, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you, my friend. Cheers, sir.
Thank you.